Remains of Americans from the 1950s home. The heroes that fought for us.
Look, it does two things for us. One is for those families, and my dad fought in the Korean War, so I'm very sympathetic to the families that did not have their loved ones. It's just enormously important emotionally for them to have their loved ones come home. For the country, it's a reminder that if you risk your lives and you serve America, we never forget you. That we will always be trying to help, always trying to find a way to reunite you with your family. And I think that's a very important part of being American. It's the exact opposite of what we were just talking about with the Democrats who are willing to kill babies after they're born.
What is the, when you see and you juxtapose the two images today, that they bring in a guy that's going to jail just to slander the president for no seeming purpose except to embarrass him while the president's on foreign soil. Imagine if this happened under Obama.
No shit.
And the president's negotiating the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you what it says to me. The Democrats are willing to tear down America if that's what they have to do to get ahead. And I think that backfires. I think the average American is more of a patriot than that. And the average American looks at this and just says, this is really pretty despicable. And I think that it actually hurts them in the end because people get it. People aren't stupid. You're going to bring in a convicted liar in order to have him, and by the way, a guy who for 11 years took money from Donald Trump. I mean, I was trying to get today and I couldn't get it, but I was trying to figure out how much money did he make from Trump over the years? Because all of a sudden, he's saying all these mean, nasty things. Boy, that sure wasn't how he talked for 11 years.
No shit.
Well, I mean, there's a dramatic change of pace. Do you think there's fallout from this new Green Deal? And how do you think the American people react to no more planes, no more cars, no gas, no oil, no cows, and everything's free, and maybe you shouldn't have children, and, oh, reparations, and Kamala Harris wants prostitution legal today?
Oh, is that right? I didn't hear that one.
That's a whole lot of different things. Look,
and late-term abortion.
Well, of course, not just late-term abortion, but infanticide.
Infanticide, correct.
Murder.
So let's
call it what it is, boys.
I'm
Murder.
actually working on a thing on reparations because I think, Kamala Harris is from Jamaica. Would she be eligible for reparations or not? I mean, who's eligible? Who's not eligible? This whole thing is insane, and I think it's good for us to take it seriously and say, let's start with Elizabeth Warren. Who does she think should get reparations, and how would you decide it, and what would the standard be? And it rapidly disintegrates into just being stupid. I mean, this is truly becoming a stupid party because the ideas are crazy. But let's take the provision in the so-called green proposal that they're going to retrofit every building in America. I mean, I'm confident that AOC does not have a clue how many buildings that is, nor does she have a clue what it costs just to retrofit one building. And so what you end up with idea after idea, which would be okay if it was a freshman bull session at the dorm, but it's crazy when it's somebody who's in elected office proposing it for the country.
I got a break.
Troubling to me is that we all on this committee, all human beings, want to decrease the frequency of family separation and decrease the frequency of anyone being the victim of sexual violence. The question we have to answer is whether or not the policies of open borders or the policies of a secure border would greater facilitate those policy objectives. I wanted to ask Ms. Asher, what impact does it have on your colleagues when members of Congress talk about abolishing ICE? Does it impact morale, recruitment, or operational capability?
Thank you for the question, sir. There's no doubt that in the last year and a half, even up to 2 years, my 6,500 or so officers in the field who do interior enforcement, which we don't talk about that too much these days, are facing much scrutiny, unfair allegations made by media and various organizations, assaults on my officers while conducting interior enforcement has gone up well over 160%. There's no question that it is a very chilling environment for my officers as they conduct their mission in promoting public safety and quite frankly upholding the laws that Congress has passed.
And have any of the people you've worked with shared their views with you regarding the impact on their job performance when members of Congress demonize the work done by ICE?
We have on a regular basis, my field office directors, our leaders in the field, do regular town halls with our officers. Our first and second line supervisors take very seriously the repercussions of these allegations, et cetera, on our officers. And so morale, yes, has gone down.
Thank you, Pat. I have limited time. I wanted to recount the story of Guillermo T. This is the only way we know him. He's a 57-year-old construction worker, and he would have come to the United States without a child, but because we treat people differently if they bring kids, he brought his 16-year-old daughter to the country, and he said this, and I'm quoting, "This is the reason I brought a minor child with me. She was my passport." Chief Provost, is it becoming more and more typical that people who want to come to our country illegally are viewing children as their passport or their mechanism of entry?
As I stated before, our numbers of family units are increasing dramatically. Also, the increase that we are seeing is just a couple of years ago, the ratio of male parent with child was a 1-to-5 ratio. It's now almost 50-50. With female parents that are coming here. This is a tactic that we have through interviews. It is something that is being utilized.
And so it's not, as I hear your testimony, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not a function of a greater desire to have the children in the country for the sake of having the children in the country. At least with some of these individuals, the child is viewed as a mechanism of transit. Is that consistent with your understanding?
As I stated in my opening statement, that is a trend that we are seeing, and as social media and other news spreads that will impact your ability to be released into the country. I believe that it is part of the pull factor.
And I appreciate and I take with all sincerity the concern my colleagues have about children being separated from their families once they reach the United States, but it's deeply troubling to me that I don't seem to be hearing any Democrats referencing the challenge that occurs when a family is separated south of our border to facilitate smuggling or transit, or a child literally functioning as a passport. The mayor of Chenaga, Guatemala, Mayor Juan Jose Rivera, chronicled what he called illegitimate adoptions for cash, where in his town people would go and buy and sell kids like they would buy and sell passports so that the kids could get people better treatment when they came to our country illegally. He said, and I quote, "This is the most serious problem we have." And so I'm wondering if you could share with us the feedback you've received from people in other countries about the impact of the United States' policies on family separation that occurs south of our border.
Well, what I can easily speak to is the fact that those numbers are increasing of the fraudulent cases. We've identified at least 1,700 cases so far since April of this year, or this past year, of definite fraud cases. Those are the ones we've been able to identify, of individuals that are coming with a child that they are not a parent or guardian to.
Mr. Chairman, may I be recognized for unanimous consent request?
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see my time has expired, but I'd seek unanimous consent to enter into the record a June 22nd, 2018 New York Times article entitled, "Why Are Parents Bringing Their Children on Treacherous Treks to the U.S. Border?"
Without objection, the article from the New York Times, sometimes referred to as the fake news, is admitted to the record.
Everyone, I'm Dana from Miami, where he warned against the dangers of socialism. The president saying America stands with the people of Venezuela and stressed how socialism has ruined that country. The biggest reaction coming when President Trump declared, quote, "America will never be a socialist country," which, Jesse, was the great line from the State of the Union speech. Right. Saturday is a critical day. This is when the humanitarian aid that is on the border, that they're going to make a move to try to get it into the country, and the Venezuelan people, especially the army from under Maduro, has a choice to make.
Yes, and the Greg Gutfeld show will be following that closely on Saturday as that develops. I think this was a twofer. You know, this was a foreign policy and domestic policy speech. You know, you want to attack socialism abroad and at home, and I think he did that very nicely. He cast socialism as a philosophy that's dying, and cast himself as the leader of a movement that's ushering in change and more futuristic and hopeful, and really slickly melded socialism in Venezuela with socialism socialism here in America. When he was describing socialism as an ideology, he's talking about rigging elections. He's talking about a borderless nation. He's talking about seizing wealth, controlling industries, and using institutions to punish political enemies. He said those very same things about people here at home, and he's using that rhetoric to kind of mold in people's minds socialism abroad and here in America.
The president, Greg, is taking great pains to make sure that the Europeans were supporting Guaido over Maduro, but when he speaks, he has the most words and the strongest words. He's the most powerful speaker.
This is why having Trump in the White House now, whether you love him or hate him, is important, because remember, President Obama was absent during the Green Revolution. He was absent with Hugo Chavez, and he was there for Cuba, so it's nice to have this difference. No one explains. He said that socialism is dying, except here, right? It's not dying. It's because here, our campuses do nothing to explain why socialism keeps failing. Its toxic premise is that it's centralized. Capitalism, it's very simple. Capitalism, decentralized. So if one little part goes wrong, only that part suffers, but everything else is fine because of individual rules. With socialism, it's centralized, meaning if the top rots, everything rots, which is why the Maduros and the Chavezes and every socialist Castro before them, they plunder and they don't profit because of the only, you can't create a profit, all you can do is take. So that's the key difference. And if somebody could explain that to a high school student, socialism would be dead in a second.
Katie, Maduro, the disputed president, still has support around the world. And it's not a slam dunk yet.
Not yet. There's 50 countries in the world that are supporting Maduro, 65 that are supporting Guaido. The UN is still recognizing Maduro. Those advocates for human rights and dignity are still recognizing Maduro. But I thought it was interesting to see the president talk about socialism never happening here. And the reason why is because, as Reagan said, socialism is never, or freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction, and you have to fight for it. So the people in Venezuela are fighting against socialism there for freedom, and people in America are going to have to fight to keep socialism out of America.
Democrats today called on President Trump to offer temporary protected status for Venezuelan refugees. Juan, what do you think of that?
I think it's a good idea. I mean, there's no...
Here, he has some thoughts on the pending Mueller report and where the Democrats have drawn conclusions before the findings are even known. Also with me this morning, retired four-star General Jack Keane on the American response to China's military aggression as we await the specific details of that pending U.S.-China trade deal happening. President on his next move.
Will I veto it? 100%. 100%. And I don't think it survives a veto. We have too many smart people that want border security, so I can't imagine it could survive a veto, but I will veto it, yes.
My next guest is making his own prediction about how it all plays out. Senator Lindsey Graham is with me this morning, Republican from South Carolina. He is the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee and serves on the Senate Appropriations, Foreign Relations, and Budget Committees as well. Good to see you, Senator. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
So how does this play out? The Democrats going to put this resolution up on Tuesday of this upcoming week. Then it moves to the Senate. Can you tell us what happens then?
We might lose a few Republicans in the Senate. All you need is 51 to get it out of the Senate. So to pass the House with a handful of Republican votes, it'll come to the Senate. It might get 51. It'll get vetoed by the president, and Republicans will stand with the president to sustain his veto, and it will be deader than dead.
Good. So what do you want to say about this? I mean, here we have a situation where we continue to see break-ins at the border, at the ports as well. I mean, why would Republicans not be behind the president on this?
Well, some people believe that the emergency declaration could lead to Democrats in the future doing the same thing on other issues. That's not my concern. My concern is a broken border. It is not a manufactured crisis, and what upsets me so much is that in 2013, almost all Democrats voted for $9 billion for border security, for barriers, as part of a $44 billion package. So to my Republican friends, it's clear to me they're not recognizing President Trump won. They're not having the same attitude about barriers under Trump as they did Obama. You're basically legitimizing, marginalizing the Trump presidency by not
Get out of my face, man. Come on.
Because the Democrats are not playing fair with President Trump. He doesn't have any choice but to declare a national emergency, and he has all the legal authority needs to do it.
And in terms of the money that he can gain from other agencies as a result of the national emergency, we're talking about, what, $3 billion roughly from the money in the Treasury? I mean, tell us where this money comes from and why you believe that these are monies that have been appropriated but not used and are available to the president in this regard.
Well, he wants $5.7 billion. Now, what does that number represent? That number represents the top 10 priorities of the Department of Homeland Security as to where you actually need barriers. This is not President Trump sitting down and making stuff up. This is what the professionals tell us we need. These are the top 10 sites that we need a barrier to protect the border, and the total cost is 5.7. You take the 1.375 out of that, what Congress gave him, and you go into the military construction bill, you go into other pieces of legislation, you move money around, and you build out the wall.